Nick Freitas, my fellow bearded right-wing dad. Welcome to Dad Saves America.
Oh, that's right. The internet dads unite.
That's right. Well, you've got a book that came out this year, The Man Book, a point-by-point guide to sucking it up and getting the job done. I love the cover. The cover, it's like you could just sell it just for people to look at the cover. On this cover, which everyone should buy this book, is a set of things you should get done, like make a steak, run for office, win a fight, kick down a door, choose a whiskey, flirt with your wife, and go to church. So this is a great time for us to talk about what does it mean to be a man healthily, properly in this time. So let's start there. What does it mean to be a man, to be a good man, to be masculine in a way that is good?
I think whenever, growing up at least, whenever I heard the term, be a man, it always meant get the job done, keep your word, regardless of pain, discomfort, being tired, being hungry, whatever it was. There are challenges that stand in the way of you getting done what you need to get done. And being a man means you overcome those challenges in order to get it done, to keep your word, to honor God, to provide for your family, to protect the people you love. That's what I hear when I hear be a man. And that's all fine and good. But the question is how do you develop the appropriate skills and capabilities to do that? And how do you develop them spiritually, emotionally, intellectually, physically, and professionally? And so the whole book was about this idea of these are the things I've learned. It's not me sitting there like preaching at, young man, like you got to do this, you got to do this. It's more of, hey, I've had some interesting experiences through my life. Being a man, being a husband, being a father, being a soldier, being an elected official, being an entrepreneur. And these are the things I learned. So insofar as you're interested in these things, insofar as you're interested in these characteristics or these capabilities, and some of it's from experiences where I got it right, and some of it is from experiences where I got it very wrong. And that was what I wanted. I just wanted to convey this in such a way to where if somebody really has a desire to be a good man, you'll notice in the book, I'm not the model of a good man. Right? Christ is the model of a good man. I'm someone that's trying to do a better job at all of these things and a little bit further down the road than some of the younger men coming after me. And so I just wanted them to have this information.
One of the things I've noticed in doing this show is I'm pushing 50, and I think there's a limit to how much at least I can reach young men if they're not ready to hear the things I want to say. I don't know. I'm curious, what's been your experience in getting like your perspective and your message out to younger guys? Because one of the things I've noticed is, we're doing this podcast thing. We'll have different guests on, and they'll bring different people sometimes. When I have my buddy Rudyard Lynch come on the show, who's here in Austin, he will bring a different younger crowd that's a little more edgelordy and right wing, and I will suddenly be getting called a cuck in the comments. Especially if I say anything nice about my wife or my relationship with her or what I've learned from my wife, God forbid. How have you found like trying to like give a like well-rounded man up like piece of advice to young people on the internet? And now a little bit about today's sponsor, American Hartford Gold. If you're a parent, you know the job is bigger than just paying the bills. Every day you're trying to teach your kids lessons they'll carry for the rest of their lives. Work hard, tell the truth, take responsibility, live within your means, leave things better than you found them. These ideas built strong families long before they built a strong country. One thing I've learned is that your children pay attention to what you do more than what you say. They're watching how you prepare, how you solve problems, how you plan for the future. That's one reason I believe in owning physical gold and silver from American Hartford Gold, the precious metals company I trust. No one knows exactly what the economy will look like 5, 10, or 20 years from now. Preparing your family for an uncertain future isn't about predicting tomorrow. It's about building resilience today. Gold has helped millions of families preserve wealth through changing economies for generations, frankly, for centuries. It's tangible, it's durable, and it's a great way to diversify and protect the savings you've worked so hard to build. American Hartford Gold has an A-plus rating with the Better Business Bureau and thousands of 5-star reviews. They can ship gold and silver directly to your door, or you can have it stored securely in a tax-advantaged gold IRA if you're thinking about the long term. And right now, when you call and mention I sent you, you can get up to $20,000 in free silver with your first purchase. Call 888-650-9836 or text DAD to 65532. That's 888-650-9836 or text DAD to 65532 or click the link in the description below. Because one of the greatest gifts you can give your children is the confidence that comes from being prepared and a stable financial future for them to inherit and build on. All right, I'll keep this quick. If you like what you're hearing and want to hear more, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss our new content as it comes out every week. And now, back to the conversation.
The first, well, I'll start with something I did wrong because I was talking about masculinity, and I was talking about the importance of being able to kind of like suck it up and drive on and fight through things and don't complain, just do what needs to be done. And it was actually my co-host Christian Hines, who's Christian's I think 32 now. But at the time, I think he was 30, and we got done with the podcast. He looked at me and he goes, "I am so sick of hearing that crap." And I was like, "Well, sick of hearing it from who? Who?" He goes, "I'm sick of hearing it from you." And Christian and I have been friends for a long time, and we've worked together for a long time. And one of the things I always say I appreciate about Christian is we have very frank conversations with one another. And my immediate response to that was not, "Oh, please tell me more." My immediate response was, "What the hell is your problem?" And he goes, "I'm just so tired of men of your generation." He goes, you're in your mid 40s. He goes, you have a beautiful wife. You have 3 kids. You're successful. You're doing all this stuff. And you're constantly looking at guys like me going, "Why don't you just work harder?" He goes, "Do you have any appreciation for what it was like, growing up in the era that we did?" And my immediate response, which was the wrong response, but I'm going to tell it anyways. My immediate response was, oh, wee lamb. I'm so damn sorry. Because at 25, my ass was behind a 50 caliber machine gun in Iraq. What were you doing that was just so difficult and challenging that the advice I'm giving and hearing it from me is just a real problem for you, right? Because I was dealing with situations of I might die tomorrow and exactly what, and he stops and he goes, "Nick," he goes, "I don't question for 1 second that going to war was more difficult than anything that I've had to go through physically. I don't doubt that you've been in far more dangerous situations, and I respect you for all of it. And that's one of the things that you need to understand is you're right. You went to war. You went to war twice. You went through difficult things." He goes, "But you also got married young and you had kids and you knew what you were fighting for and you knew what you believed and you knew that there were people that more importantly believed in you. You had a wife. You didn't just love your wife. She loved you. She respected you. Like you knew what you were fighting for. And guess what? Culture at large praised you for it. All of the masculine traits that you have, all the things that you project, you grew up at a time when those things were largely praised. And by the time it got to the point where it was no longer praised, you were established.
Yeah.
You'd already married the love of your life. You'd already had kids. You already had a business. He goes, I was in high school when I first started getting told that everything about me as a man was wrong. He goes, I remember the first time I was in college and I was having what I thought was a rational conversation with somebody. And they said, well, of course you'd say that, you're a white man. And then realizing that opportunities with respect to education, with respect to getting a job, with respect to finding someone that would want to marry me, all of that was diminished. Why? Because I was a straight white guy and a Christian and a conservative. He goes, so I'm not claiming that my experience was somehow, harder or more demanding than war, but I am saying you don't know what it is to really go through life as a young man in a culture which has systematically told you from the time you were little that you're the problem. That every instinct that you have to want to be a man is toxic and bad and something women should be afraid of. You don't know what that's like. And I remember I looked at him and I said, dude, I'm sorry, because you're right. I know what's going on right now. I can see it, but you're also right that I look at it through the lens as a guy that's already made it along those levels that men so desperately want to have. Because men do want to be married. They do want to have kids. They do want something to fight for. They do want something to believe in. And so that proceeded for us to go into a different conversation. And one of the biggest things that I realized about the problem, because we hear people talking about the manosphere and red pill and black pill and all this other stuff, and the problems with like Andrew Tate or Nick Fuentes or whoever else it is.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I try to remind Christian men, and one of the things I try to remind conservative men is, you know, there's a reason why those guys are so popular. And you think it's because, you know, maybe they're wealthy or they've been successful on some level, or in like, you know, Andrew Tate's case, he can fight. He's surrounded by beautiful women. What color is your Bugatti and all of that? And I said, yeah, that factors into it. But you want to know the primary reason why those men are popular with another generation of young men right now? It's because they felt like those guys were sticking up for them when nobody else was.
Mm-hmm.
Those guys were able to articulate what they were going through. Now, the remedy that they've offered is horrible, or I'll say it's halfway horrible, because there's nothing wrong with them telling young men, be strong, be capable, be competent, be intelligent.
Yeah. Be fierce, be a little scary, even, you know.
Be dangerous, right? But the question is for who? For what? And the answer that they primarily give is for yourself. It's so you can conquer. It's so you can dominate. It's so you can be the top G. It's so you can sleep around. It's so you can have the nice house and the nice cars. And it adjusted the way that I talk to young men, because the first thing I do right now is I acknowledge this sucks. You deserved to be defended, and you were not properly defended, because there were too many that thought, well, I got mine. It's not really impacting me. And when young men really needed us to step up and protect them, we weren't there. And so they started to listen to other men who they thought were defending them. Now, I think they're leading them down a horrible path, but there's two things I've realized. One, the first thing that you have to do if you want young men to actually listen to is you need to acknowledge the unique circumstances in which they've grown up and what they've had to face. Because, yeah, for many of them, it's not war, but it's something that in certain respects may not be as physically dangerous, but I would argue it's more soul crushing. And it's this idea of being told that there's something inherently wrong with you because you're a man and because you want to be a masculine man. The second thing that I think we need to understand, and this I think goes the heart more of Christian and conservative men specifically, is what I think young men are looking for right now is not just somebody that can make a good esoteric argument for free market capitalism or Western civilization. I said this at ARC. You tell young men, you need to fight to defend Western civilization. And their response is, do you mean the civilization that did this to me or was too weak to stop it?
Right. Yeah.
So we need to get back into this idea of how do we represent ourselves and what we believe. If I'm going to tell young men to choose biblical masculinity, which is the argument I make, I don't just make for some, random I argue for biblical masculinity. Well, then they better see it reflected in my life. They better see it reflected in my marriage. They better see it reflected in how I raise my kids. And I will tell you this, I firmly believe this. I'll give you a story to prove it. They better believe that you're someone that they can depend on in a fight. And I'll never forget, I was talking to Young America's Foundation, great organization, and it was in Washington, D.C., and it was their summer event where they have all these college students come out, and they had been doing a women's luncheon for 10 years, and they hadn't been doing a men's one. And so they decided to bring back and do the men's luncheon. I was the first one to get to do it in 10 years, and I talked about this idea of masculinity. And as we got going, and I noticed some of the questions I was getting asked, I looked around the room. There's probably about 300 to 400 young men in there. And I said, let me ask you guys a question. I said, whenever I come to speak, I said, YAF is more of a politically oriented, it's not just political, it's culture as well, but it's more of a politically oriented entity. We're in DC because a lot of you are very interested in politics and Ronald Reagan and all of those things, which is great. There's three things that always get listed about me whenever I come to speak. One is that I'm a former Green Beret combat veteran. The other is that I served in the Virginia House of Delegates. And the other has been that I have a somewhat successful social media presence. I said, which are you most impressed with? I said, and all of them, same time, like Green Beret. Okay, why? Most of them in that room didn't want to be soldiers. They didn't want to be Green Berets. They didn't want to be in the military at all. They respected the military, but they didn't want to be in it. And what it really came down to is that for them, what that represented was somebody that could win a fight. And you don't have to be a Green Beret or a soldier or in any sort of profession which actually deals with, violence or conflict. But I do think more and more young men are saying, I want to see more people that are willing to step forward that I know would have my back intellectually, but would also have it physically. And so I've really gotten into this idea of, how do I, just like when we were growing up and we all wanted to be able to say, my dad could beat up your dad, right?
Yeah, like my dad's a surgeon. He's a South Philly Italian guy. I've never seen him get into a fight, but I think if he had to, I know he could do it.
Yeah. He's competent. He's competent and he's capable, right? And so again, I don't want to put too much emphasis on this. I'm not suggesting everyone's got to be a professional fighter or whatnot. Not everyone's got to be Chad Robichaud, right? Like 18-1 in the octagon. But I think what men on the Christian and conservative persuasion need to start understanding is they better see boldness out of us. No more of these, I'm going to make an argument for you, but I'm going to put in 47 caveats because I don't want to offend a woke culture that is constantly offended by everything. They don't want to see caution. They want to see confidence and they want to see courage. And it's easier to display confidence and courage when you're confident in yourself spiritually, emotionally, intellectually, professionally, and physically. And so those are the two things that I've really seen young men. They want to see someone that understands what they're going through and to actually defend them. And then they actually want mentorship and discipleship coming from people that they think are comprehensively looking at manhood from all of those different directions and earnestly seeking to master them.
I think that before doing any of this political stuff, I was one of the creative directors at Spike TV, the first network for men. And it was funny because it was like I would say that the halcyon days of the 90s bled into the early 2000s, because I think that the late 90s was like the peak of Western civilization, is my not really a joke.
Yeah.
But it was funny because we were basically a cadre of guys, almost all of whom were already dads, and we're trying to come up with what would be as good a promo as the latest Miller High Line or High Life or whatever those were, those old Miller Lite ads. It was. You're right about the culture shift has been really, really shocking, I think. And it's shocking for those of us that sort of straddled it, because there's something about, I don't know if it's I don't know at what point you start to crystallize this earlier moment in your life, and it's kind of like the thing you think the world always will be. I don't know if it's your 20s, I don't know if it's high school, but it's sometime before you turn, let's say 40 for sure. You look back and say, oh no, this is the way it was. What about this? Can't it just be like this?
Yeah.
We didn't even used to talk about masculinity really this way. So we went from not even having, it was sort of just a kind of understood thing in the air, to instantly being the most evil thing according to progressivism.
Yes.
Why do you think masculinity in particular was targeted so consciously by all of these institutions? And why do you think, starting with schools, and why do you think it made its way into corporate America in particular? Because that's the weirdest one. I remember when it was big corporations will tend to be Republican. So at some point, that sort of toxic culture of nonsense became acceptable for Walmart.
Yeah. Oh, mandatory for Walmart.
So how do you understand what happened there? All right, if you've been a frequent viewer, we talk a lot about privacy and free speech, especially now in the digital age. And that is why I'm excited for today's video sponsor, Cape. They're a privacy-first mobile carrier that solves the problems you didn't even know you had with the big guys like AT&T and Verizon. One thing you might not realize is that both of those companies, and Sprint and T-Mobile, actually sell their customer data to third parties, including governments, which means it ends up in the hands of foreign governments and bad actors. And if you don't want that to happen, Cape offers you a lot of unique protection. And let me just give you 3 examples. First, Cape deletes your call and text metadata every 24 hours. So in my opinion, this by itself makes the service worth switching to. Second, Cape encrypts your voicemails so that only you can access them. Voicemails can reveal a lot more than you think, from personal messages to authentication codes and sometimes even bank information. Most voicemail systems are outdated and unencrypted. Cape makes sure your voicemails stay secure. Finally, for those of you traveling abroad this summer, you'll get 15 gigabytes per month of secure global roaming included with your plan. So as your phone hops between countries, it connects to local telecom providers, but not all networks are secure and not all governments treat privacy the same. Cape routes your traffic through its US-based mobile core. Secure global roaming gives you the convenience of international data roaming without exposing your identity or communications. Cape is typically $99 a month for their consumer service, but right now they're offering an early adopter price of just $70 a month for anyone who signs up. And if you sign up this year, that price is locked in forever. So go to cape.co/dadssavesamerica and use code DadSavesAmerica33 to get 33% off your first 6 months. That's cape.co/dadssavesamerica, code DadSavesAmerica33. Or download the Cape app at the Apple App Store, Google Play, and the Crescent Store. Cape, America's privacy-first mobile carrier. And now, back to the video.
Well, we've both talked about this before, and you've done really good work on this when you talk about Antonio Gramsci. And what's interesting is, for those who don't know, Antonio Gramsci was an Italian communist. He was jailed by Mussolini. And what Gramsci's big epiphany was that he wanted Marxism, but he thought Karl Marx got it wrong with respect to how revolution was going to take place. He thought it would be all this late-stage capitalism stuff, and the internal contradictions of capitalism would destroy itself, and the Marxists would take over. And what Gramsci realized is, this doesn't seem to be happening the way that Marx said. Right. It's happening in Russia, but it's not happening in the capitalist countries. Why is that? Oh, because it turns out free markets actually deliver the goods, not just for the rich exploiters, but for laborers. Yeah. And we see this all over the world. In no country do you watch laborers from the United States desperately trying to get into the socialist utopia of Cuba or Venezuela or North Korea. It just doesn't happen, ever. It's never happened. And you see, especially the best examples are Korea and Germany, because they were both split in half. And we all know what happens when people flee, right? They never flee North in Korea, and they never fled East in Germany. Right. So, and now again, a lot of that's after Gramsci, but Gramsci was recognizing it in the 30s. And so he said, well, we got to create a cultural Marxism. We got to create a different culture to compete with the bourgeoisie culture, right? Which was predominantly a Christian culture. It was one that was based off of Christian concepts of morality and truth. It was based off of Christian notions of family structure and duties and responsibilities among men and women. And you look all throughout left-leaning, like hardcore Marxist left-leaning movements, they were constantly trying to denigrate what we might call the traditional family. Yeah. You look at Marx, he didn't just hate capitalism, he hated this idea of a man and woman entering into a monogamous relationship with one another, before God, before the state, getting married, raising kids. He wanted to break apart all of that. And one of the primary ways he tried to convince men to do it was by encouraging promiscuity. And one of the primary ways he encouraged women to do it was by this idea that the husband is the oppressor. The husband and father is the oppressor. And so we're going to replace the husband and father with the state. And oh, by the way, we're going to liberate you from the kitchen and from the home, because you don't want to do that. You want to be going out doing other things. And so the children are going to be raised collectively. Well, there were certain aspects of this ideology that failed and didn't really take root. And there were other aspects that was much more of a slower burn. For instance, allowing the state to play a far more prominent role with respect to the education of our children happened relatively quickly. And this was just seen as a good mass production approach to education. We want everyone to be educated, right? So of course the state has to play a role.
And that goes back to, that goes back to Thomas Jefferson. I mean, and beyond. I mean, from the earliest days of the Republic, there was a belief that that it was essential to have a republic that's educated in order for it to function. And so education was seen as a kind of public good in the eyes of Jefferson and Massachusetts in particular.
And it's always a question of who runs it, who's in charge of it. Like I don't think anybody's questioning that a good quality education that teaches you to read, write, and be economically and socially successful is a bad thing. We all think that's a good thing. It's a question of how do you get it and who runs it and who says.
Yeah.
And the state control of it is what Marx wanted. Now, on top of that, you also had other things going on. And these were very real issues, very real like problems that Marxists and the leftists in general saw as an opportunity to push a particular agenda. So for instance, you look at the civil rights movement, there's no question that there had been horrible injustices, which are completely out of line with Christianity, completely out of line with free markets that were directed against, for instance, African slaves. Right, or directed against minorities. There were certainly different legal arrangements that put women in a position where they did not have a similar say as men with respect to voting or property ownership or things like being able to even work in certain professions. So there were certain things that we could look at in a society which generally appreciates equality before the law and meritocracy, which is to say that we want people to be able to do things because they're capable, and we don't want them to be excluded because of their skin color or their sex. So all of those things were legitimate discussion points or legitimate grievances. And the left saw these as, these are our opportunities to glob onto these particular movements and push them in a Marxist direction. And what's interesting is, communism had done this with certain things, but not with others. For instance, you wonder, there was no crisis of masculinity necessarily in the Soviet Union, at least not the modern version of it, right? There was still a manliness associated with the left at that particular time.
Yeah, that's one of the things that is the weirdest culture shift, is the old Soviets had mustaches and were literally strong men. And now there was a recent picture from a meeting of the Democratic Socialists. And they're all wearing masks, and they all. Yeah. It looks like there isn't 3 molecules of testosterone in the entire room.
No,
it's like they're not. Well, they're not winning any battles in that crowd.
And that's what we have to explain, right? Because explaining leftism or explaining class envy is normal, right? If you have every single economic system will produce disparities. The question is, how are the disparities produced? And do people actually have a legitimate way to overcome those disparities or overcome challenges? And what we found is free markets actually provide a much better mechanism for achieving that than centrally planned economies under socialism. So why all of a sudden do we get this woke version? And that's where you get like the Frankfurt School. That's where you get postmodernism. That's where you get deconstructionism. That's where you get this idea that the whole world could be divided into oppressor and oppressed. And then on top of that, with feminism, you had this idea that the real problem was masculinity. The real problem was men. And interestingly enough, within feminism too, it wasn't that the problem was masculinity. They wanted men to be less masculine at the same time they wanted women to be more masculine.
Right.
So they wanted men to become more feminine, women to become more masculine.
It was the
worst version.
It was the MCU effect.
Yes. Yeah, and it was the worst versions of masculinity, right? It's not that they wanted women to protect and provide for their families. No. They wanted women to be the worst men, the kind that ignored their families and slept around and conquered things for the sake of conquering them and for self-aggrandizement rather than sacrificing on behalf of something beautiful and noble and honorable. So you have all this emerging at the same time where the left is jumping onto these movements, and the critical theory component really factors in here because race was a key factor for a while. But then what happened is that once again in American society, what happened? We actually started to solve some of these problems, right? Slavery was wiped out. Then Jim Crow was wiped out. Then segregation was wiped out. Why? Because you could actually make a really good argument to the entirety of the population of America that these things were wrong and immoral. They were outside of our Christian ethics, and they were outside of our founding ethics. And so you could appeal to the very things that patriotic Americans loved about America and loved about our faith in order to make a good argument for why these legal codes or why these legal discriminatory and out of bigotry shouldn't exist. And so what happened? Well, the argument was won on these things. But the thing is that the left didn't need the argument to be won. They needed something to push the revolution. And so they kept looking for more things. Like you and I both kind of grew up in the 90s, where I didn't grow up like this whole idea of like, oh, racism everywhere. Like this was, I'm sorry, I'm not saying it wasn't a thing anywhere, but the idea that racism was pervasive in American society in the 90s, I'm sorry, I don't think that was so, at least not to the way that it's advertised.
Well, there's this
and
poll,
then all of a sudden,
there's a poll on that front, right? The I think it's Gallup. It's either Gallup or Pew, but it's basically questions about your perception of race relations, which is a particular way to ask the question. But you just go back to 2000 and broadly, both Black and white Americans see race relations as good or very good to something like 70 to 75%. Mm-hmm. And then it's essentially the rise of the woke era.
Yeah.
There's a total collapse.
Yeah.
It goes from 70% to 30%. And it's really like the Obama years are the beginning of the collapse.
Yes. So again, Marxists could no longer make a good economic argument for Marxism. And so they're looking for other arguments for Marxism. And it was the civil rights movement, it was feminism. And then all of a sudden, the laws were adjusting in order to allow women greater opportunity within society and minorities greater opportunity within society. And so at the end, you're looking at it going, oh yeah, you made some good points. We don't like your Marxism, but you're right that we should have greater equality before the law. You're right that we should extend suffrage. You're right that we should do these other things. And it's like, well, crap, now what do we do? Well, you can do one of two, that you can manufacture grievance, or you can create up with whole new categories of grievance. And that's essentially what they did. They manufactured. There's this common saying that the demand for racism is so far outpacing the supply that they've got to create more of it. Same thing with feminism. And then we get things like unconscious bias, right? Or systemic racism that no one can point to in the law, but it's there, trust us. And so now all of a sudden we have all these ghosts that we're supposed to fight, and those ghosts explain everything. And the moment you present any evidence to the contrary, well, now you get into the postmodern world and the critical theory world where, no, that thing you thought you could use, like logic and reason and the scientific method, these things are actually attributes of whiteness. And if you think that's hyperbolic, understand that was on a poster in the Smithsonian.
Yeah.
The scientific method, linear thinking, work ethic, punctuality, that these were attributes of whiteness. And so all of a sudden, now you find yourself in a situation where we're not uplifting critical thinking, we're uplifting lived experience. But it can't be everyone's lived experience. It only has to be the lived experience of the oppressed. Who are the oppressed? Anyone the left says are the oppressed. Anybody that might be in a minority group, anyone that might be categorically or demographically not doing as well as somebody else, they're the oppressed. And so their lived experience now trumps facts and evidence. Why? Well, because facts and evidence are realized within this Western system of logical thinking and the laws of logic and linear thinking, which was designed by the oppressor class to keep the oppressed class down. Right? So all of these systems, they're not neutral, they're not meritocratic. No. That's what they want you to think. But in reality, they're there. And whoever's doing well, those are the people that are benefiting from the system. And whoever's not doing well, those are the people that the system was designed to oppress. Well, you think about this for a second. When you create this dynamic where the only way you can be moral and good and the only way your opinion can be heard is if you're a victim, if you're the oppressed, well, now that's the social currency. Now there's a race to see how oppressed I can be. And then the problem for a lot of white liberals was, oh, crap, we don't have any points on the intersectional pyramid. I'm trans now. I'm bi now. I'm non-binary. I'm asexual. We came up with all these various LGBTQ plus IA @ exclamation point alphabet mafia, where now all of a sudden we've allowed people to claim victim status. And so now the result is that you have people that you go and you look at their bio on X, and it's like 3 different versions of sexual deviance combined with 6 different mental health issues and a couple of flags that you're supposed to put. And that signifies what a good, noble, and wonderful human being they are. Nothing to do with their actual accomplishments, nothing to do with actual capabilities. There's no real measurement for how good they might have done for anyone in the world. No, it's about saying the right things and identifying the right way. And this seems absurd to us now, but there's a logical way that they actually got there. And I've been thinking about this a lot lately. One, if you are a good man, then if you see somebody that is weaker, if you see someone that is hurt, if you see someone that is a victim of someone, you feel a natural inclination to be able to defend them.
Yep.
Women in general are harm averse and risk averse, which is to say that they try to create an environment where they are preventing harm, and they have the same inclination. When they see someone that is perceived as weaker, that's someone to defend, that's someone to nurture. And so it's not hard to see how you could play on otherwise good sensibilities or instincts for an ignoble purpose. And the thing I would say is here's what ultimately ended up happening, and the reason why we've ended up where we are with this victim Olympics and this woke version of leftism. When something bad happens to somebody, we feel sympathy. And we generally ask a couple of questions like, how did this happen? Because what we're trying to ascertain is what was the bad thing that happened? And we're also trying to determine whether or not you had anything to do with it, right?
Yeah,
like, did you get in a car accident because a drunk driver hit you, or were you the drunk driver? Right? We look at those two things separately. So one of those things is where we display sympathy or pity. How you respond to the circumstances is what we used to display honor and respect toward. So if a drunk driver hits you and you're out of work or you lose your job or something like that, we say, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe that happened. That's horrible. How can we help?" If your response to that is to then just become a violent drunk that beats up on their family because you feel like this was unfair, we understand that the situation is pitiable. We understand that you deserved sympathy initially as a result of circumstances that were outside of your control and negatively affected you. But we don't honor or respect you if that's the way you respond to it. But now we're told it's not their fault. It's nobody's fault. And so now we're in a situation where what we used to display sympathy toward, but not necessarily respect, is now treated with respect and dignity. We call people brave. "Oh my gosh, you're suffering from this. You're so brave." No, you're not. You may be suffering from something. Whether or not you're brave determines on how you respond to the thing you're suffering from. So if you respond to this thing that happened and you overcome it and you work hard, that used to be the thing in American society that we said, "You know what? That's a pitiable situation, but man, that person is owed respect because in the midst of discomfort and danger and deprivation and whatever it was, this person overcame." And that's the model that we want to set for society. And somewhere along the line, we decided, no. The fact that they're a victim is what we want to honor and respect. And so not only do we make that the social currency, but then we made a whole new set of categories, and we encouraged people to not be capable, which is interesting because that's the natural consequence of the Marxist edict of from each according to their ability and to each according to their need. In a society where you prioritize need over ability, you get a lot of needy people.
Yeah.
You don't get a lot of capable people.
Right.
And so that's what the left has become.
I think I do wonder if some of what we're experiencing is almost just technological, because in the sense that you've sort of laid out in all that these moments in time where, if you want to say that what the left is broadly, like going back to the French Revolutionary left, right? Like that it's like, well, it's the side that wants change.
Yeah.
I'm like, just try to be fair to the impulses here, because I especially since Jordan Peterson came on the scene, I think the psychological underpinnings of some of this are more interesting than the ideological arguments. It's like, why do some people? I mean, we see this most profoundly in the political divergence of young men and young women. I mean, young women are going wacky into weirdo land, and men are actually not. I mean, yes, there's a fringe edge that's getting a little too nuts, but they're by and large kind of the same. Mm-hmm. And that points to like a kind of psychological basis of of our politics in a lot of ways at the individual level. Like, how risk averse are you? How inclined are you to empathy that can go off the rails?
Yeah.
And it does seem like we've gone from there was like this period where you had a healthy form of we need change, much like an immune system that actually detects a real problem in the body, to now we live in, to extend the immune system analogy, a world in which we've sort of solved all the things that used to be considered human problems. So now our immune system attacks itself. So like progressive change has become a like denatured autoimmune disease for Bubble Boy, living in the isolated world where there's no, you don't have any worms, there's no pathogens, everything's comfortable, there's no friction. If the thermostat's off by 2 degrees, it feels extreme because you've become so soft and hypersensitive. How much of like what's happening right now in our sort of in our politics and in sort of like this psychology do you think is that it's like a softening, like an excessively sensitive autoimmune responsive type of pathogen?
When it comes to like internet, like when it comes to foreign affairs, there was the very cynical joke that war abroad is peace at home. And to your point, a lot of the things that occupied our time, energy, and interest for the first roughly 5,000 years of human history was, how do we not starve to death? Like that was our big issue. And our big issue in the United States now is, how do we not die by type 2 diabetes, right? Like how do we not eat ourselves to death is the problem that we face now. And
we need standing desks because being sedentary is the great scourge.
So no, I think there is something unique about our time with respect to technological advancement, and you're going to see another massive disruption of that with artificial intelligence, to where it is so disruptive. The way I describe it is, if you looked at, if you were to take an ancient Egyptian, and to put this, this is one of my favorite little time mind screw facts, right? Is that Julius Caesar is closer to us. He's closer to cell phones than he was to the time that the Great Pyramid of Giza was built. Right. And it's not close, like by 1,000 or so years. Like it's a significant time gap, right? If you were to take an Egyptian farmer working in the Nile Delta 5,000 years ago, and you were to show him the farming implements of an English farmer in the late 18th century, he might go, that's a really interesting type of metal. But he would know exactly what it was. Exactly what it was. He would, oh yeah, that's a plow, right? That's a plow. Yeah, and you use these cows for it, right? Yeah, me too. Right? Like that's 5,000 years, of human history going, yeah, I get it. Yeah, this is what you're doing. My great-grandmother was born on Christmas Day, 1900. In the space of her life, she remembers her father hitching up the wagon and team to go to church. She remembers him trading with Indian tribes, right? And she was in her 70s when we were walking on the moon, right? So she got to see all. She lived through horse and buggy to the internet.
When did she pass away? When did she pass away?
She passed away in 2001.
Okay,
I believe it was 2001. So she experienced all of this, right? From horse and buggy to Facebook. That is nuts. Like nobody else at any point in human history can really conceive of that rapid a technological development, and how drastically disruptive this has been to all facets of society, to include our attention, our time, and our energies. So you're right. Like there's a lot of these things that could be going on where, again, if the men still had to go out and plow the fields, and women were saying, I want equal representation in the coal mines, they'd be like, okay, but they weren't, right? Like there was one comedian, he put it this way, he goes, you women really timed this really well, right? It was like, oh, you men are so strong, go out there and, conquer things and fight bears and, work in the coal mines. And as soon as there was air conditioning, it's like, I want rights, right? Like, so...
Unless you're in the UK, in which the air conditioning needs to be
illegal,
explicitly approved by the local governor.
Yeah. So the point is the point is that yes, for these things to happen, and there's a reason why a lot of the things that we're seeing right now didn't happen at any other time in human history. To the extent that they are, I think, is based off of us being somewhat of a victim of our own success economically, technologically, socially, et cetera, to where people really can have these luxury beliefs. And that's a great word for them. Was it Rob Henderson that came up with luxury beliefs? Yeah, this idea that you're able to believe this because you're standing on top of 5,000 years of human history that you refuse to acknowledge or recognize. And I equate it to someone driving a car while denying the existence of the internal combustion engine. Because it turns out you can drive a car just fine while denying the existence of an internal combustion engine. And if I come up to you and I say, no, you have to have the internal combustion engine or else your car won't run. Well, that's not true. I don't believe in the internal combustion engine and I drive my car every day until it breaks down, right? Then it breaks down. You're like, what the hell is going on? It's the internal combustion engine you didn't think was existing. And what ends up happening is what happens if you have someone driving a car that denies the existence of the internal combustion engine? They don't maintain it. They don't continue to do the things that were necessary to actually put them in a position to enjoy what they have. And then all of a sudden, when something breaks, you have one of two responses. You can either say, I guess I was wrong. I guess I was wrong, and now I need to learn from this mistake, and I need to appreciate the things that actually made my transportation possible. You can have that response, or you can have the response, some evil force has prevented me from driving. I have a right to drive, and some evil force has prevented me from driving, and I will vote for the first politician that promises to punish those evil forces and to benefit me at their expense. And I mean, you see this with Mamdani in New York City right now, right? Like, no, complete economic illiteracy. And they are doing things that every one of us can sit here and go, well, this is going to cause rents to go up and you're going to cause slums and people are actually going to leave and you're going to lose your tax base. And then you're going to have to raise taxes on everybody in order to make up the gap. And then you're going to have a drop off in essential services. And here's the logical thought process for that. No, it's none of that. It's none of that. And then when everyone leaves, do you think Mamdani will get out there and be like, gosh, I really thought this socialism thing was going to work. I really thought the warmth of collectivism was going to be super.
No, it's
I guess I was wrong.
Ken Griffin left, and that's the Griffith or referee.
Yes. It'll be those evil capitalists thwarted me, give me more power, and I'll prevent them from thwarting me in the future.
Well, one of the things, and this sort of ties back to sort of, I think, masculine impulses, let's say. You talk about doing hard things. And I think one of the things it's part and parcel with our moment, which is like, okay, you don't get any light or heat without friction. And this is like a fundamental nature of reality of physics, but it's also, I think, and it's very, very true of the human person, right? That you don't really learn unless you engage with like the struggle part of the learning. And there's this, the kind of stuff like our grandparents would say, you have to actually burn your hand on the stove and experience the pain to develop the proper relationship of respect with the stove. So if we have this world of relative comfort, and it doesn't really change the fact that men in particular want friction. You look at boys. I know, I have boys, you have girls, and I want to talk about.
Well, I got a boy.
Oh, I do have a boy. So you know it from both. I mean, we all know it even without having kids, but you really see it. You have a front row seat when you have them. Like boys versus girls. Well, they'll talk about so you have boys and you have a son and you have daughters. Just talk about what you've observed as a matter of fact.
So my girls, from a very little age, and my girls had they had both a strong feminine streak, but also a bit of a tomboy streak. They like to get out there and climb trees and build forts and shoot and do all that as well. But here's what I noticed: my daughters were far less likely to do things that would get them killed. Right? My son, on the other hand, was like, I think I'm going to climb that dresser when I'm 3 and have it crack my head open. And then when it cracks my head open and I literally almost die from it, 3 weeks later, I'm going to try to climb something else. And when Dad looks at me and goes, "What are you doing?" I'm going to look at him like, "What?" Why? Because he's challenging boundaries, right? He wants to go, he wants to explore, he wants to try things, he wants to climb things, he wants to build things, he wants to do all of these things. So yeah, there's just these inherent differences between the way that men and women process information, the things that we generally like, and there can be overlaps, right? Sometimes you'll have girls that are a little bit more masculine, sometimes you'll have boys that are a little bit more feminine, but these things are hardwired into us. It's not all just social constructs. And the interesting thing about it is, because to your point about this idea where it's friction and conflict, and we see Victor Davis Hanson has got a book called The Father of Us All, where he talks about warfare just being this kind of like natural inclination toward mankind. And even when we have peace, what do? We start fighting over something else. And so that conflict tends to be there. And the thing I would say is, I think it comes from, in some cases, it's just a natural consequence of interacting with the world and finding out how it works and the boundaries and what works and what doesn't. Yeah. And because we have imperfect knowledge, we're going to have mistakes. And because we have differences of opinion on what we observe, we're going to have conflict with one another about the best way going forward. But I say this, and I believe it with every ounce of me. I think so much of this goes right back to the Garden of Eden with the first kind of lie in the form of a question that was ever told, and that is, did God really say? Because that's what the serpent says to Eve, right? Is like, did God really say? And what he's doing is he's offering this alternative version of reality than what God has said. And what I find interesting about that is when I see these conflicts, when I see these distortions, there are some things which I can chalk up to this is, again, a natural part of not having complete information and trying to figure out how to work with other people that might have different preferences. But then there's this other thing where you look at this conflict right now between men and women.
Yeah.
We were designed differently intentionally. This isn't by accident, and it's not just for reproductive purposes. I have come to find out through 27 years of marriage that when my wife remembers 1,000 different things in the middle of an argument, that's not because she's trying to screw with me. It's because God designed her to think a certain way. When my wife is furious at the fact that I can compartmentalize into one singular topic so much that things can be going on around me and I don't notice any of it, she understands that God created me to think in a particular way. And so I think a lot of the conflict that we see right now is based off of this idea that we are trying to compete in fields where we're supposed to be cooperative.
I'm going to pause for a second. There's some kind of technical thing on our end. Just hold tight, hold your thought. Like your face is covered by this dialogue box.
And nothing ever stopped on my front. It says 54, 40.
And it says you're recording.
54, 43.
Now it looks like it's fine. It's just some browser bullshit. I generally do. I have a bit of an Italian temper, but and it can get extreme. It gets extreme. It actually points to a difference between men and women that I've observed, certainly in my own relationship, but I think it's true more broadly, which is I have a temper. It is directed entirely at things. So,
yeah.
Right? So, we have some stupid hiccup with this remote video nonsense, and I can feel the anger rising in me. Like in a kind of like throw this effing computer across the room sort of way.
Yes.
And the same is true if like I hurt myself, I'm like, that effing table, and I'll kick it like an idiot. Yeah. Now, my wife, and I will say women generically on average at the center of the distribution curve, will blame themselves. I'm in, like, something's going wrong with the technology. It's not this computer sucks. It's, why am I so stupid? Why can't I use this? Why do I get so confused? I must have done something wrong. It's so striking and it's so generic. And I mean, have you dealt with that with your daughters versus your son? Like, we sort of plow through like apes. And the world has to move around us.
Yeah.
And it does make men, I think, more. I think maybe it's part and parcel with our like general tendency to be willing to take risks. Because when we screw up, it's like, like, wasn't my fault.
No, my wife will say that if the house was on fire, I would be calm as a Hindu cow. Like, how do we? All right, gather everything up. We got to get you guys out of here. Do this, this, and this. Right? Let's move. Follow me. If someone broke into our house, I would be excited. Like, oh, finally! I've been waiting for this day. But if the printer gives me one of these, I can't print your black and white page because I'm low on cyan. The hell is cyan? I will kick that thing into the wall because it's like, you have one job and you're not doing your job and you deserve to be destroyed. And I have a lot of hostility toward inanimate objects for failing to do their one function correctly. Yeah, to the point where the moment I go in to print something, Tina is standing by in case. She's like, hey, babe, can you go do this for me? I'll just take care of that printer. I'm like, and I've gotten to the point where I know what she's doing, and it's okay because I know it's going to be better for everyone if I just don't deal with the printer.
It is I think there's again, in so many ways, I feel like the rise of the Andrew Tate types, and it's like they almost came out of the recession of Jordan Peterson during that critical period in the public stage, because he sort of took to the stage this sort of super unlikely frog-voiced guy, to talk about masculinity. And it was like,
it's essential,
and
we all love Jordan, by the way. We're not making fun of Jordan.
We just saw each other in person for the first time at this art conference that Jordan founded, and so I sort of am waxing. He's still alive, but he's struggling with his health, and he's not on the public stage once again. Yeah, and I think to kind of come back to some of these themes, you have there aren't enough battles for our boys to tackle that are productive and healthy. And so it is this, again, a kind of, we have different versions of the autoimmune disease analogy taking place, where our boys want to be rough and tumble, like your son that's going to climb that dresser and crack his head open, like mine did the same stuff. He would climb trees to levels where I'm like, oh my gosh, you're going to give me a heart attack. And yet I would be more inclined to let him do it. And so when you don't have those battles to fight and you're told that your desire to fight them is evil, and then our girls are having their social impulses hijacked to apply not to other people they know or to relationships, but to abstract BS like the climate or Gaza or whatever, just stuff that they have no agency.
Nurture anything except children.
Yes. Yeah. You shouldn't be a mother because that's patriarchal or something, but you should take on North Africa as your child.
Yeah, you should mother Gaza. So not your kids. There's, there are horrible little expenses on the climate, but definitely Gaza. You should definitely mother that. Yeah.
How are you protecting your daughters, and how successfully, if you can be honest about this, are you protecting them from the toxic waste that flows in their direction? Because I think, and we talked about this together in London, that this is something that I think our friends on the right don't spend quite as much energy focusing on, which is like, it sucks as fathers that our daughters are under assault, and also our daughters are under assault. So our boys have been told they're toxic trash and that the future is female, and then our young women, our daughters, the future mothers of our grandchildren, are being told that their impulses are also essentially not right. They shouldn't sort of obey all the biological clocks that continue to tick. And if they do, there's something wrong with them. And basically everything that's evil and self-destructive, they should embrace. So how are you protecting your daughters from all of that stuff?
Well, I think that first thing is really important. I think a lot of guys right now, they don't want to hear about the problem with young women because they feel like all of society has arranged itself to benefit young women. What I would ask young men to understand is, no, it hasn't organized itself to benefit young women. It's organized itself in a way to lie and flatter to young women in a way that's actually horrible for them. This is why the women that are most likely to embrace feminist doctrine, who, by the way, are living at the most feminist time in all of human history, are overwhelmingly the most dealing with mental illness, depression, sadness, confusion, etc.
Yeah.
So you would think like women have been told you should want this thing. Then they got that thing, and the women that believe the most that they should want that thing are the least happy. Conservative women who are living in the least conservative feminine time in world history, they're still more happy than the liberal women. So why is that? Well, what I would tell people is men have been lied to in two directions. Like one is be more feminine, and the other is be a barbarian, right? That's the Andrew Tate versus the emasculation. Women have also been lied to in two directions. One direction is go be a girl boss, right? You don't need no man. You need the government, right? You don't need a husband and a father. You need a boss, right? And then you need to go out there and sleep around and do all these other. I swear, I feel like feminism was created by licentious men that just wanted to sleep around without consequences, right? And be taken care of. So on one side, they've been lied, but then on the other side, they've also been lied to with this idea that true femininity is nothing but a 1950s housewife aesthetic. Right? It's sundresses and sourdough bread. That's it. That's what femininity is. Both of these things are lies. And they're especially pernicious lies because of how they turn men and women against each other. So when it came to raising our son, we've already talked about that. When it came to raising my daughters, I got to say, first of all, and I ask people to take this very seriously. You really need to consider getting your kid out of the government school system.
Yes.
Because, and I don't just say this as a parent who saw the government school system and who chose to homeschool. I also say it as someone that served for 4 years on the Education Committee in the Virginia House of Delegates. I say it as someone that served as the subcommittee chairman for higher education in the Virginia House of Delegates. So I was not only looking at this from a parental perspective, but I was also looking at it from the perspective as a legislator, and a legislator that was in a unique position to be able to get access to data, experts, individuals working within this apparatus. The reason why I say you really need to strongly consider getting your kids out is because there is a narrative that is being pushed on not just your boys, but your girls within schools that is pushing them toward this girl boss narrative. And even a promiscuity narrative. And they're also very, very susceptible to the whole LGBTQ plus influence. And in fact, I once told people there was somebody that did a statistic that said a third of girls at this California high school identified as
queer,
non-binary or queer. And I said, I'm surprised it's not more. And they said, why? I said, well, if you tell a bunch of girls that they're evil oppressors by virtue of their skin color, and the way that they could escape that is by claiming non-binary status, well, then why wouldn't they? Because women are predisposed to maintain social security within their social networks. So what did we do with our daughters? Well, first of all, we took them out of public school. And all of a sudden, a lot of the rules and the values that we wanted to convey to our children, they're not being competed with on a daily basis by not only other students or students with smartphones showing my kids things I don't want them shown in 5th grade.
Yeah.
Right, but by teachers and textbooks and high school administrators and guest speakers that I have no idea are coming in to go speak to my kids that are pushing a particular ideological narrative. Not to mention the fact, and you really need to understand this, because I don't care how good your school is, there's got to be a teacher or a textbook or some book in the library you don't like. And when you put your kids in that environment, here's what goes on in their mind. Mom and dad provide me with food, clothing, and shelter. Teachers provide me with education. So if mom or dad tell me something and the teacher contradicts it, who do I believe? I believe the teacher, because the teacher's the expert.
Yeah.
They're the authority figure with respect to conveying knowledge and wisdom to me, not my parents. Well, I didn't have to compete with that. That doesn't mean I didn't expose my kids to other ideas, but I want you to imagine every girl's experience when they go through junior high and all of a sudden they're going through puberty and their hormones are crazy and they're horrible to one another. And they're dealing in this competitive environment where now all of a sudden they're being overly sexualized. And you're trying to convey to your daughter good morals. You're trying to convey to your daughter that she's beautiful and she's wonderful and she's intelligent. But there's certain things that she has to do in order to get the best out of life, which means there's certain things she has to avoid in order to get the worst out of life. And then she goes into an environment where a teacher is telling her something different, and you told her to respect her teacher. You're sitting in an environment where all the other kids are doing it a different way, or Jane's allowed to date at 13. Why aren't I? You're competing with all of that. I didn't. Now, if you were to meet either one of my daughters, here's what you would find. You would find somebody that is very strong in their opinions, knows what they believe, is more than happy to have a robust conversation with you. But you're also going to find girls that love music, that love the arts, that love theater. They can be, one minute they're very, very feminine and dressing up in dresses. The next minute they're shooting AR-15s. You know, my oldest daughter got married at 21. My youngest daughter will probably also get married very, very young. Why? Because they wanted to prioritize being wives and mothers. Now, why did they want to do that? Well, in part, it was because we brought them up in a Christian worldview where we elevated these things as wonderful things to experience, not horrible things that keep them from self-actualization. But the other thing that we did that was so critically important is we did our best. We didn't always succeed, but we did our best to model what a good marriage looks like. We did our best to create a family environment that our kids would want to replicate. And one of the greatest compliments I give to my wife is that if you ask any one of my kids, both my daughters and my son, if you would have asked them like toward the end of high school, what do you want to do? Yeah, they might tell you about some professional goals. My oldest daughter loves theater. My youngest daughter likes working with animals. My son wanted to go in the army. But every one of them would have said, I want to get married. I want to have kids young, and I want to homeschool my kids. Why? Because they wanted to replicate the environment my wife created for them.
You know, I think that we have in many ways fundamentally misunderstood or continue to not take seriously enough just how destabilizing it is to have like relationships not forming in the early 20s. Like, you and I are both sort of an early guest of the show. Malcolm Collins said, he put this way, and I adopted it ever since, that I feel like I got on the last chopper out of Nam.
Yeah, I've heard that.
You know,
yeah. I think I saw it on your show.
It's like, you know, I met my wife at work. We got married. She got pregnant right away. And then she didn't want to go back to work. Mm-hmm. She was also, my wife's actually 6.5 years older than me. She'd already had like a bunch of adventures and whatnot, moved all over the country. So it was like, but like all of that was hard in a way that was entirely understandable. Mm-hmm. Just like, oh, it's hard to meet people. It's hard to, but it's also like random, and you don't think you get to choose from everyone. In the before times, like that wasn't an option. Yeah. There wasn't an option to try to choose from everyone to find the perfect fit. You just had to kind of, even whether you believe in God or not, you were going with God on this one no matter what.
Yeah.
Oh, we got set up. We met at work. I went to a bar. I took some ridiculous class that my buddies said would be super funny and stupid. And then I met like whatever it was, It was sort of random.
Yeah.
You know, there's these stats, and I don't know, you know, there's like arranged marriages actually have lower divorce rates. Now that might be, that's all kind of cultural norms for sure. And some of them.
Yeah, there's other cultural considerations, but yeah.
And some of them probably aren't great.
My son has already told me, he's like, Dad, honestly, if you and Mom could just find someone for me, that would be great. That would be great. You know, I'd like final say, but you know.
Well, and I guess this is all to say that I think the biggest lie we tell our kids as a culture is that their present comfort is the most important thing to be concerned about.
Yeah.
Like, it's like, and I mean, I'll give you like an example that, again, like the Gen Zers will be like, you're just a boomer and you got in before it all got wrecked. Mm-hmm. But the obsession with home ownership.
Yeah.
It's like, first of all, I know 25% of you Gen Z actually own homes, but why do you think owning a home is so great? It's really expensive, even when it wasn't that expensive. And it's kind of annoying. And you know what? You know when you want to buy a house, like really buy a house, when you're married and have kids and want to have an extra level of stability that you're not going to move, and now you're going to put up with this lower than the S&P 500 returning asset that's constantly breaking. Yeah. But no, like the one American dream thing that has still kind of survived was the one that was always a little dumb, which was the obsession
Well, and
with home ownership.
I understand. I understand the desire to own property. Right? I get that. My daughter, who is a homeowner, and it's funny whenever I say that, they're like, "Well, she had the bank of dad." I was like, my daughter did not get a single dime from me when her and her husband bought their first home, and she was a cosmetologist, and he was a high school counselor with
So the
with
1%.
student loan
So
debt.
the 1%.
Yeah, oh yeah. So totally one percenters, right? Basically Elon Musk prototypes. It's not like they had a lot of money, but my daughter said it best. She goes, I think one of the problems, she goes, home ownership is difficult. It has gotten more expensive. She goes, but the real problem is, she goes, I talk to my friends and they expect to own now a house their parents can afford to own until they were in their 40s.
Yeah.
And that's true. When I look at the house I'm in now at 46 versus the house I started off with at 24 or 5 versus the first apartment I had at 19. Oh yeah, there's a bit of a there's a bit of a discrepancy there on what these things look like. When I look at the house I was in just 5 months ago, yeah, that was I loved it, but there was nothing to write home about. And so I think part of it is these unrealistic expectations about what you should have. It's like, well, my grandfather could afford a home on one income. It's like, yes, he lived in an 800 square foot home
with no running
with
water,
no air conditioning. It's like let's at least put things in context. This is one of my problems with the black pill movement, where it's like, oh, everything's horrible. Like, shut up. You're making a lot of money telling young men that everything is horrible and there's nothing that they can actually get out of life. But in reality, there's still a huge degree of upward economic mobility in the United States. But the same question pertaining to how did you protect your daughters from this kind of world of leading them astray, it was very similar to how I protected my son from it. And that was we did not fail to expose them to different ideas, concepts, or natures. One of my favorite things I used to do is whenever I would see my kids regurgitate something that I knew that they had heard me say, I'd immediately take the opposite position and make them defend it. And we would go through this position of understanding why and critical thinking and how do you discuss these things. And then again, but my daughters are hardcore Christian conservatives who love theater. Yeah, not exactly a bastion of conservative thought. And yet they thrived in that environment without adapting or without succumbing to it in order to get along and fit in. Why? Because they were entirely secure in their own identity. They were secure in their own beliefs. They felt that those beliefs were not taught to them in such a way as to be pure prescription. So I didn't say, believe this because I tell you to, or because dad's in charge, because it's my house and my rules. It was, mom and dad believe this is true. And you get to look at our behavior. You get to look at our marriage. You get to look at the world around you. You get to have robust discussions. You get to challenge us, and we get to talk through these things so that you can decide whether or not you believe it's true. But we're not going to act like all worldviews and all cultures and all ideas are equal. They're not. We're going to act like there's such a thing as objective truth, and we're going to act like we have these processes in order to arrive at that objective truth. And we're going to equip you with these tools to not only do this while you live under this house, but regardless of where you go. And when they leave confident on who they are, and my kids, again, they will tell you first, their identity is in Christ, right? That's their identity. If things are going good, great, God bless it. If things are going bad, well, yeah, I knew it would. Right? God didn't promise me anything different, right? And so there's this enormous confidence in who they are and what they believe. And so when bad things happen, they're not horribly confused. They're not depressed. They don't lose their entire sense of identity because they didn't get a part in a play or they didn't, pass a school that they wanted to on their first try. It's like, no, I just have to work harder and I have to get better. And then I have to go back and I have to continue on. And so, and they do so confident that sort of mindset, that sort of worldview will serve them well, both when things are going well and when things are going poorly. And that's an incredibly secure place to be in your life. And I've seen it play out. All three of my kids, and again, I can tell you all the things I did wrong. Like I am constantly grateful to God that my kids turned out as well as they did, because I spent the first 10 years of my marriage, I was gone for half of it. Between combat deployments, training units, training deployments, I was gone. And we had all three of our kids when I was still in the military. Then I go into the political realm where you're gone all the time and you're constantly being inundated. You get, kind of irritating things, and then you get real world threats. And yet I look at my kids and they're all well adjusted. They all know what they want to do. They're all confident in who they are. I like hanging out with my kids. I never understood parents like, oh, I can't wait for the school year so I can get my kids out of here. Like, well, maybe if you didn't hand them over to the state for their education and their moral development, you'd actually have people you wanted to hang out with. And I don't know. I'm going to be honest. I don't think it was that hard.
I do think that there's like this over intellectualization of everything. And, I had Wilfred Riley on the show a couple times, and the most recent, he was just like, most of everything's just not that hard. It's just not that complicated. Life's not that complicated.
Yeah.
Like, what do you want out of life? Right? You want to find, like, first and foremost, like above everything else, you want to find a mate. Like, that's what you want. Like, 95% of the time, you want to find somebody that you're currently attracted to, that maybe and hopefully you'll continue to be so, but that will have its own ups and downs, and we all get old and fat and ugly eventually. And then, and then you want to have a life together. You want to have meaningful work. That's going to change, though. And even what you think you really want right now will probably not be what you want 10 years from now. And then a lot of the rest of it's all kind of hard and messy, and you don't really know, and what you think you want, you don't really want, and you strive for this thing, and then you want to, you're in this company and you want to reach this next level, and you're striving, and then you realize like each step up brings all these other costs, and then you keep up with the Joneses, and before you know it, you're like, well, wait a second, like I'm not really that much happier. I'm working a lot more. Did I want all this? Maybe I didn't want all but that's like the stuff.
Yeah.
And that stuff's like as old as the human animal. And I do feel like we as a culture used to tell the stories we used to tell ourselves, like in Hollywood movies, were simpler like that.
Yeah.
It was just like a love story at the end of the day, and maybe a car chase for the most part.
John Wayne kills the bad guy. And we're all cheering. Because John Wayne was obviously the good guy, and that guy was obviously the bad guy. And we want to add this level of complexity into it. So on that point, so in my last job in the military, Special Forces Intelligence Sergeant. So I did counterterrorism analysis, and in an SF, it was unique because we would do our own analysis, and then I get to go hit the target. In most cases, your intel crew puts together the targeting packets, and then someone else goes and hit it. In SF, we do it largely internally. We have outside resources that we can utilize, but everybody on the team is a door kicker. And I remember, there's this point where this new analytical software was coming up, and it gave us the ability to scale data in a way that just revolutionary. And what they used to say is that humans were really good at analysis because we understand human behaviors and motivations better than a machine does. But we're bad at scaling data, and a machine can do that very, very well. And so what you did was you merged the person with the machine, and now I can take into account 100 factors instead of 4 factors. Because I'm just using my brain power. I got pictures on the wall, I got some yarn, and that's what I'm going with. But now if I have this analytical software that can reach out into terabytes and terabytes worth of data and bring back stuff, well, now I can make connections that I never could before. And it is objectively good, as long as you remember that at some point, you're still going to have to make a decision and go do something. And the problem sometimes is when we have less information, there's a point where we hit it. Well, it is what it is. We got to go do something. We got to get something done. We got to go hit an operation. I looked at the 4 things we can look at, and now let's go and do it. When now all of a sudden, theoretically, I can look at hundreds of things, thousands of things. You can have an analysis paralysis, where it's like, well, I just need a little bit more time. I need a little bit more planning. We need a little bit more of this because I don't want anyone to get hurt, and I don't want to fail, and I don't want to. There's something to be said for saying, okay, we've done what we can, and now we got to go get a job done. And you know what? Some bad things might happen. And if it does, we're going to learn from it. But there's no substitute for doing the thing. And in fact, the more you guard yourself from doing the thing by convincing yourself that you need more data, you need more time, you need more information. What if I make a mistake? You're going to find out that some of the best learning that you do is when you go do the thing and you make a mistake and you learn from it. And you learn from it in a way that you can't replicate on a PowerPoint presentation. And I think you're spot on. You're spot on too with the relationships. People have got this idea now where there's billions of options. It's like, now there's like 6. In reality, there's like 6.
Yeah, no, you're actually that example from the military software. It maps against like these godforsaken swipe app things, like 1-to-1. and I haven't really thought about it quite this way before, but there's this like behavioral psychology thing, loss aversion. It's obviously true. Where humans are way more sensitive to loss than to gain. So what does it mean if you're presented with what seems like infinite options and you have to choose? No matter what, you are only going to choose one thing. But all that explosion of options doesn't change that your choice will still be one thing. But it's magnified the opportunity cost or your perception of it. It's magnified your losses. Like, I'm swiping through looking for the perfect match of all of my things. Every swipe is a loss.
Yeah.
But only one will be the gain. Like, that is like horrible.
Somebody asked me once, they're like, how did you know your wife was the one? I said, it was easy. I married her. And they're like, well, no, but like, I said, are you asking how did I know I wanted to marry her? And like, yeah. I said, okay. Well, because I was physically attracted to her. We spent a lot of time together. We talked about important things. And I noticed that we didn't talk about a lot of frivolous stuff. We talked about important things, ideas. We actually talked about what we thought marriage should look like and what our roles and responsibilities and expectations were. And the more we talked about it, the more we got excited about it, because the more we realized we're probably going to get married. I said, but she became the one the moment I asked her to marry me and when we said I do. Because at that point, there's no other option in the world. I said, the problem is you're going into it like you got all these options, and the options are still in the back of your mind once you got married. I didn't have that mindset. My mindset is there's no such thing as an option anymore. There's our marriage. And now all of my time, all of my focus, and all of my energy is in how do I make the marriage the best it possibly can be? So there is no other woman in the sense that I'm as a possible mate. There's no one I'm comparing Tina to, because she is the only one that fits that role. That's done.
You said you were at the start of your marriage, and you got married young by today's standards, and then you went off. So how did that go? And what was the hardest part of that? Like that's really hard.
So there's this couple online, and they do a lot of funny videos together, and a married couple, they just had their first child and they're super excited about it. But they were doing this thing once, and she was saying, she goes, everyone talks about how hard marriage is. She goes, in reality, I think life is hard. And marriage is the person you get to go through with the hard stuff together. And sometimes we convolute this idea that it's marriage that's making it hard, when in reality, it's just life.
Yeah.
And I think there's something to that. And I think that, I think we put too much emphasis on marriage being hard. I don't think it's really marriage. It's hard dealing with difficult things throughout life, whether it's job loss or trying to figure out where to live or any of these things. And yes, when you add another person to that process, that can be difficult, because sometimes you have two different opinions on these things. But I just don't. To give everyone context, my wife and I got married at 19 and 20. We both came from broken homes. We immediately moved to the other side of the country. I was in the military, so I was gone a lot. And people will look at that and say, oh, that must have been so hard. And Tina and I will look back and be like, there was hard things, but being married wasn't the hard part. And I think part of that also is because we got married young. One, we didn't bring a lot of baggage into our marriage. So there was no all these people before us, which influenced the way we thought about relationships and sex and everything. We didn't have that. It was us. We built that together. Neither one of us built a life and then added someone else to it. We built it together. And so the difficulty came into, how do we effectively communicate? How do we work through disagreements? And yeah, we had some fights because we're both like very, very, very sure of ourselves on what we believe, and we like to debate and things like that. But both of us had this commit. We had two commitments that I think saved everything from the very beginning. One, we both agreed that marriage was absolutely for life. We didn't discuss any conditions for which there would be an exit strategy.
Yeah.
And so both of us went into it like, no, this is for life. This is my person. This is it. And so right off the bat, what does it do? Well, it closes out these potentially millions of options that you think you have. So that's gone. So you don't focus any time or energy on that. Two, because we were both committed Christians, and we executed it very poorly at times, but because we were both committed Christians, what that meant was there was this objective standard for truth, morality, and our respective roles and responsibilities within marriage that either of us could appeal to. So if I'm not doing something that I should be doing, Tina can appeal to that, and she's right. That's it. There's no discussion. There's no argument. She's right. But I can do the same thing to her. So my wife and I, from a very early on, we didn't have a hard time telling one another, or telling the one, I'm wrong, you're right. We'll do it this way. And we had our moments. Like my wife once, one of the first year of marriage, I was arguing with her and I really thought I was right. And she looked at me and she goes, Nick, you have to talk to me like I am the woman that you love.
That's really good. That's a good request. Because people listening should really let that one sink in. Talk to me like I'm a woman that you love, because, man, do we sometimes get trapped in our ego nonsense in our marriages when we're talking, and we lose sight of that.
Yeah, I can get, look, I try not to, but I can get harsh. I can get condescending, especially when I think I'm wrong and I think there's a bad argument being made. But what my wife was informing me at that point was, Nick, we both came from broken homes where a big argument could mean everything was falling apart. When you debate, I don't mind you debating with me. I don't mind you arguing with me. But you can't argue with me in a way that makes me feel like our marriage is in question, or that your love for me is in question, or your willingness to stick with me or protect me is in question. And what I found was it was actually really easy to argue with her while keeping that in mind. And there was another time where she said something to me where the way she worded it, I was like, what the hell did you just say to me? And she goes, oh, no, I didn't mean it that way. I'm like, honey, let's get something straight. I am not responsible for understanding what you meant. I am responsible for reasonably interpreting what you said. And because she had grown up in an environment where a lot of times things would they would blow up and it became this, just say whatever you can to win. So a similar issue that I had, but manifested differently. And this was one of those things too, where we got in this, I'll see a lot of men complain about their fact that their women will use emotional manipulation. Well, very early on in our marriage, we did not allow that to take place. It's one of the things I tell men, any man that gets advice from an older man that says, oh, don't argue with your wife, just say yes, honey, happy wife, happy life. That's probably a miserable husband. And he's a miserable husband in part because of his own damn fault. Because instead of actually asserting himself with respect and dignity and honor and standing by his guns when he was right, he gave in because he allowed himself to be emotionally manipulated. I didn't have that relationship with my wife, right? We would hammer things out. And my attitude was, emotions can inform what we're talking about, but they don't alter the state of reality. They don't alter facts and evidence. And so emotions are an invitation to thought, but they don't direct our thinking. And the end result is that I was actually liberating for both of us, because there are times when men get emotional.
Yes,
all of a sudden we want to stand our ground. Yeah, all of a sudden but the difference is that women will manifest emotional manipulation through playing the victim card, or appealing to our desire to want to protect them. Men will apply the emotional argument through sarcasm or anger. Yep. When we feel like we're being challenged, we'll either dismiss something through sarcasm or we'll demonstrate anger. Why? Because we don't want to demonstrate weakness. That's still an emotional response to a situation. So what it is, we just became better at understanding, like, okay, how are our emotions influencing this argument? But what's the truth? We want the truth, because there's not going to be any better outcome than both of us being on the same sheet of music on where the truth is. And neither of us will get there if I'm allowing anger to motivate me and she's allowing some form of emotional manipulation to impact the way she discusses things. And so you start to figure that out, and it doesn't mean it doesn't rear its ugly head at times. It does. But when both of you understand it for what it is, you both get to appeal to be like, babe, you're doing the thing. Like, you're right. I'm doing the thing. And it helps a lot because so much of it is communication. The other thing I would say that I think is an absolute cheat code for marriage that just infuriates modernity. If you take the Bible seriously on what it says with everything, but specifically for the issue of marriage, if you take it seriously on what it means, if you take seriously as a man, when scripture says, husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church and gave his life for it. Women, when you read scripture and it says, women, submit to your husbands, respect and submit to your husbands. And you understand that in the full context, especially when you get into the Hebrew, because when God describes Eve as a helpmate to Adam, the word he uses is more akin to an irreplaceable support. In fact, God uses that word to describe Eve to Adam, but he also uses it to describe himself to Israel, to the Jewish people. When you start to understand those things, and when you look at what are our respective roles, when you look at it, and the Bible says that if you do not provide for your family, you're worse than an infidel. When you look at the various characteristics that you're supposed to display as a man and display as a husband and display as a father, men, do not exacerbate your children. Right? When you look at these things and you said, you know what, I'm going to believe these are true. Even if you're not totally sure, even if you say, I'm going to believe this is true and I'm going to operate in this fashion, the results you get from it are absolutely amazing. Because what I understood about my role is when I have to make a decision, if I'm going to be the leader of my household, that means when I make a decision, what is best for my wife and children, what's best for the family is my goal. But if we ever have to choose between what's best for my wife and children and what's best for me, I choose what's best for them. When you can develop that sort of discipline, not only it will be better for them, it will be better for you, because men get a sense of value based off of what we protect and what we're responsible for. Ladies, if you marry the sort of man whose leadership you trust, what it allows you to do is it doesn't make you oppressed. You get the full flourishing of your femininity. You're not submitting in the sense that you do whatever your husband tells you to. What you're doing is that when you come to a point where you've reached an impasse, but a decision has to be made, and you not only allow him to make that decision, but then you work to make that decision successful. You build yourself up and you build your family up, and you build your husband up into the sort of man who will make good decisions. When you show respect to your husband, because it's important for women to understand that men can't feel love apart from respect. For a man to feel loved apart from respect makes us feel pitied, and we don't want to feel pitied. But when you show genuine respect for your husband, when you show admiration for his character or for his capabilities, it is amazing how much of his life he will dedicate to making the world the sort of place you want to live in. Right? He will literally work himself to the bone serving his family when he feels respected and appreciated in the effort. And so what's amazing is that if you just take everything that popular culture is telling you right about relationships, the same advice that they've been giving you that is causing you to have multiple relationships that you're miserable in, that is causing you to engage in rampant promiscuity, which is destroying your sex life when you get married, that is causing you to ship your kids off to somebody else for their education instead of you actually investing the time in your children's life and creating the sort of little humans you want to hang out with. When you reject all of that crap that has produced these results, that is making everyone miserable, and you say, you know what? I'm going to give this a shot. I'm going to pretend that this is true, even if you don't really believe it, and I'm going to apply it. It is absolutely incredible. The bond you forge with your wife, the bond you forge with your children, and the sort of environment you create. One of the greatest demonstrations of how true it is is how much God exponentially blesses imperfect yet faithful attempts. There is so much I have gotten wrong in my marriage. There is so much I've gotten wrong as a father. But at a foundational level, I believe this was true, and I tried to apply it, and I tried to correct myself when I knew I had done it wrong, and I allowed my wife and children to correct me when I had done it wrong. But it created this assurance in my wife that I loved her, that I would not only fight for her, I would not only die for him, but I would live for him, and that I would improve for them. And it convinced me that my wife was with me to the bitter end, no matter what, because the thing that men really associate love with is loyalty. And when your wife looks you dead in the eye and says, honey, I don't know about this decision, but I trust you and I'm going to follow you and we're going to make it work. That man will do everything he can to make sure that decision works for you before it even works for himself. Right? When your children feel the love and security, not just of two parents that are pouring into them, but when they watch mom and dad in love with each other, the degree of security that brings to your children and the degree of hopefulness for a future relationship that they can have just like mom and dad has. You combine all of that together and you are creating a bulletproof marriage that is aspirational, that is loving, that provides peace and security, that it's not going to be devoid of conflict, but knows how to solve it when it comes along, that never sees it as a threat to the marriage itself, because this is the rock upon which all storms will crush itself.
Yeah,
that is a different kind of life.
It's funny. I'm in the process of sort of experiencing like a return to my faith and it's not even really a return, because in one sense I never left. But in another sense, I sort of never was even really there, because I'm a cradle Catholic and sort of went through the motions and then got out of school and sort of held on to being Catholic as like an identity thing. Like, oh, it's because I'm sort of very constitutionally conservative as a person. Like I don't take a lot of pleasure in throwing off traditions. I'm very traditional. Mm-hmm. But in the past couple of years, for a whole bunch of reasons I've talked about elsewhere, like my wife and I have come into a practice together of like going to mass, like of reading the Bible, of putting our faith at the center of our relationship. And it has done like literally everything you're talking about. And we already had a great relationship, but there's something, the only way I can put it is, as an intellectually oriented person, is that when you push on this stuff, it just works. And when things work, that's about as close as you get to validation of truth as we have, right? Yeah. Like when it works, that is at least a strong signal that it's probably true or could be true. Mm-hmm. And then we just continually test that this is the scientific method. You have a hypothesis that this will cause that, and then you run the experiment, and then you do this, and then that happens, and then you say, okay, that seemed to work, but was that an accident? Is it just luck? Did they happen in that sequence because of some third thing that I wasn't paying attention to? Mm-hmm. And then you run it again, and you run it again, and after a while, you're like, oh, this causes that. Like, okay, like there's to have this not cause that, you have to interfere or have some other thing that's a blocker. And I have found that in my Christianity to be the case. Mm-hmm. The more I actually like pay attention to it, like interrogate it, try to break it, try to live it, try to see what happens.
The more I stray from it,
it's like, man, that works. Yeah. I think there is something, about trying to live not authentically, whatever that means, because that's just vibes. That's just vibes. Yeah. I like my vibes tomorrow will be authentically different. So what does that mean about who I am? But if you actually just try to live on the basis of truth, like what do I think is right? knowing that it's actually hard to know forever, and you're never going to get the total picture until the end. Seems to work. Seems to work pretty good. And the thing is, we sort of always know. We get such strong internal signals about when we're lying to ourselves, and they even manifest in our health and our physical reality. That we know when we're lying. We know when we're living by lies. We know when we can't sleep at night because we're living by lies. I think that's where that's the other part, like you said earlier, about our young girls and the mental health crisis and the ideological elements of it. It's like, well, because a lot of those beliefs are lies, and so they drive you crazy when you try to live by lies.
And nothing is more unsettling to one's identity that when you've adopted a lie as the absolute truth upon which you're going to build everything else. And so when you see people do that on a fundamental level, you see this with people suffering from gender dysphoria. Because all of us have beliefs, and if you look at those beliefs as concentric circles, there's certain beliefs that we hold onto that are a core component of our identity, and there's other things that you believe because they happen to be convenient at the time, and maybe if new data comes along, it's like, for instance, if someone gave me directions to get to a place, and I had always taken those directions, and I thought those directions were really good, and someone said, well, you can take a shortcut here, and it cuts off 10 minutes from your drive. I want to be like, no, absolutely not. This is a core component of my identity. I'd be like, oh, really? And then I'd try it. And if it cut 10 minutes off my drive, I'd be like, oh, awesome. I now believe this thing, right? It's not a core component. But when you see people that start to believe things about reality that are fundamentally opposed to it, it is one of the most self-destructive things that you can do. And if you And honestly, it's one of the most societally destructive things you can do, because when you have a group of people that have now bought into these things and now they are desperately trying to alter reality in order to try to make it come in line with what they want, now you're not only doing a great deal of self-damage, you're doing damage for arguably millions of people. And that's what we're living in right now.
As we start to kind of come to the end of 2 hours, what makes for a sound identity in your view? So you've told your story in different bits and pieces. One of which being, you got married young, you had what sounds like it was a kind of dysfunctional childhood family situation. And then you've done these things like being in the, being a Green Beret, actually seeing combat, then running for, then being in politics, which is like from an identity perspective, I think kind of could be very destabilizing because of all the incentives you face and the compromises you think you need to make to achieve goals. Yeah. So how do you think about, and what's your advice for trying to like build an identity worth keeping brick by brick?
Sure.
And so how much of it is under our own control? Because some of it's kind of not.
Yeah, some of it, well, there's always going to be circumstances you can't control. There's very seldom times where you can't control the way that you respond to those circumstances. Even if it's just kind of mentally evaluating them and controlling your own emotions and things like that. So there's 5 things that I talk about when I give advice to young men, 5 categories of their life, and that's the spiritual, the emotional, the intellectual, the physical, and the professional. And the reason I always start off with the spiritual is because people will argue with me about this all day long. Like, Nick, I like what you say about the things, but why do you keep talking about the God stuff? Well, whether you want to adopt Christianity or not, whether you want to acknowledge God or not, the very act of acknowledging or not acknowledging God is the starting point of your entire worldview. It has to be out of necessity, because God is the only thing that can actually provide a logically consistent foundation for objective truth and objective morality. You can't get it through pure scientific reasoning. You can't get it through pure materialism, because you're going to get into this endless regression of, okay, well, what justifies that? Well, what justifies that? What justifies that?
Yeah. It becomes all preferences.
Yes, all preferences and utility. Yeah, preferences and utility.
And people utility, say, well, by the way, that can't be measured. This is why I've never been a utilitarian.
Yes. Because the moment someone says, well, if it works, now the question is, works for who? Works for who and at the expense of who, right? It may work for me to steal all of your stuff. That may work for me very well. I might find a great deal of utility in stealing all of John's stuff. I guarantee you it doesn't work for John that way, right? So you have to start off with the spiritual, and that question is so important. And to your point earlier about when you live in a relatively peaceful, a relatively secure, a relatively prosperous time, a lot of times you can get away with this idea of not having to answer those questions in your life because you're well-fed, you're warm, you're clothed, and you feel like you don't really need it. But you do. Because almost everybody at some point in their life comes face to face with a crisis where they're trying to make sense of the world. And time plus chance plus matter, right? The evolutionary response to everything doesn't answer it. Almost everyone I know believes in love and they believe in justice to some degree. And evolution doesn't explain those things unless you just want chemical reactions. And then love and justice is no longer what you think. It's just response to stimuli.
I'll
You
say,
have to
punch in for one moment on this fact. Not enough can be made of the collapse of fertility on this score, because if you want to be a materialist, if you want to say this God stuff's a bunch of gobbledygook, it's a bunch of fairy tale magic spaghetti monsters and whatnot, fine. So it's the selfish gene then. Now we have to contend with the more people think like you, the less they want to have kids. So how's that selfish gene working out then? Like that doesn't really, like, how does it work that the people that believe in this thing you say is nonsense do the thing that you say is the actual mechanism? Like that itself is this
well,
weird.
For all the utilitarians out there, and this is another thing I like to say. This is kind of the Pascal's wager, but for the utilitarian, if you're truly a utilitarian, then you should absolutely become a Christian. How do I know this? Because Richard Dawkins has now announced that he wants to live in a Christian culture. Oh, golly gee willikers, why is that, Richard? Right? But let's say the spiritual is the most important. Why? Because when we look at the emotional, what I mean by emotional, and I'm going to get back to the spiritual to round this all up, but when I get to the emotional, you want to be emotionally mature. What does that mean? It means you allow your emotions to inform the way that you think and interact with the world, but you don't allow them to direct them. So it's one mechanism that you use to do that. Why is that important? Well, because I'm going to feel anger. If I feel anger, why? Why do I feel anger? If I go into a particular situation, I have a visceral reaction to something. Why? That's an invitation to thought. But it also should be a clue to me about something that I'm experiencing. I also need to have the kind of emotional maturity which allows me to be there for the people that I love. So if I'm so stoic or if I'm so compartmentalized or closed off in order to protect myself or whatever else it might be, what happens when my daughter really needs tenderness from me and she can't get it from me, so she goes find some other guy to get it from? What happens when my wife really needs to see that she can have an impact on the way that I feel about something, not just the way I think about something, and she never gets it from me. And so she sees me as being cold. So that emotional maturity is really important. And the way that you actually develop that is by contending with those emotions. And it's about demonstrating this sort of emotional discipline that you need to have. There's a reason why one of the fruits of the Spirit within Scripture is self-control. It's because emotions are going to come. But how we utilize those emotions to the benefit that they're supposed to do instead of allowing them to control us is important. The intellectual. Not everyone's going to have the same academic interests, and not always going to have the same academic capacity. But have you ever met one of those good old grandpa boys? The good old boys, that's just full of practical wisdom.
Oh yeah.
And they're not quoting Shakespeare. They're not quoting Shakespeare to you. They're not quoting Aristotle, but they're the sort of person that went through life paying attention and learning and storing stuff away and applying these things in a way that made sense, to where they're the sort of person you go in and you sit down with them and you just talk, and they sit there and they have a way of just listening and dropping wisdom on you that you're like, why did I not think of it that way? That's what I talk about. When I say that men should develop the intellectual, do I think men should be well-read? Yes. Do I think that we should think about things? Yes. But more than anything, I think men should be the sort of person that other people can depend on for wisdom. And so developing your critical thinking skills, developing your ability to observe and to listen and to put things together and to make the appropriate connections, to understand causation and correlation, so that when somebody needs us, we're the ones that can give wise and sound advice. I think that's the mark of I think that's a mark of a good man, is that intellectual capacity. When it comes to the physical, I think men should be able to protect, and I think they should be able to provide. And I think it's really, really difficult to do either of those things if you don't take care of yourself. Another consequence of men being able to work in fields for which there isn't a great deal of physical labor, which, by the way, is me at this point. Yeah. I have to do other things to develop myself physically because my job no longer provides that opportunity. I have to make up for that deficit by going to the gym or going and doing MMA or whatever else it is. But I will tell young men they need a violent hobby. They need to keep themselves in good physical conditions, and they need to learn how to fight. Not because they're going to do it as a profession, not because they're going to be fighting all the time, but because there's a certain degree of confidence, there's a certain degree of physical prowess and mental prowess that comes from knowing how to handle yourself in a dangerous situation. And for anybody that challenges me on this, the thing that I will ask them back, and this is especially prevalent with young men, they really receive this when I say it. I said, I want you to imagine the love of your life bearing your children that you never thought you could love anything that absolutely. Now I want you to imagine them in a dangerous situation, and the only thing you're capable of doing is calling another man to come and save them. Do you ever want to be that kind of man? Or do you want to be the kind of man that your wife and children can depend on you to be able to carry them out of that burning building, or to be able to deal with that stranger or whoever it is that's threatening them, and you know how to deal with that situation? So do not put off the physical. Keep yourself in shape, because you're going to be able to be there for them longer if you do. You're going to be able to work for them harder if you do. And learn how to fight, because that's an important component, I think, of being a man. The other thing too that I say that's kind of flippant and funny, but is absolutely true, and something we don't talk about enough, I think, within the Christian community, is sex has been horribly perverted within the broader culture, but it was actually meant to be something that's truly incredible within the boundaries of marriage. My wife committed to be the only man she ever gets to sleep with. She committed to be the only woman I ever get to sleep with. We each want the other to be happy about what they got, right? And keeping up on the physical, is good for that, right? So do it. And then the final is the professional. And the professional is the marketable skill sets. You said something really, really important a while back about this idea that, there was a time where people kind of thought I would work in the same industry for 40 years, then get a retirement and that gold watch, and that was it. That's just not the reality. And it wasn't the reality for a lot of history, but you need to be developing marketable skill sets so that you can provide not only for yourself, not only for your family, but so that you can also provide for people in need when they need to rely on something. And that's not always money. Sometimes it's having a skill set that is really, really useful for somebody in need. It is a wonderful feeling to be able to take a capability that you've developed and to be able to use it to bless somebody else that really needs that capability. And I think it breeds confidence, and it gets to be a part of your identity. And each one of these things, you'll notice as I talk about it, each one of these things, emotionally mature, that's a part of your identity. You're the person that remains calm, cool, and collected in a dangerous situation. In the moment of crisis, you're the one that keeps it together. That's a part of your identity. You're the sort of person that your children go to and that other people come to in order to get wisdom, in order to work out problems. One of the greatest feelings is when your son or your daughter, especially as they get older, is trying to work something up and they want to call dad. Dad, I got to work through this. Can you help me? Absolutely. Go ahead. Right? That's a part of your identity. The physical, the sort of person that when you walk into a room, you have a presence about you, where other men understand that if something were to go down, That guy would probably know what to do about it, right? That becomes a part
It's
of your
helpful to
identity.
not come in the room with Nick Freitas. it's like
the professional, right? The professional, the series of capabilities that are useful in a variety of situations in a marketable setting to where you can provide both for yourself, your family, and for others in need. That becomes a part of your identity. But here's the deal. Here's what needs to be understood. There's going to be moments where you fail emotionally, where you don't keep good self-control. There's going to be moments where you fail intellectually, where you don't have the right answer. There's going to be moments where physically, for whatever happens, maybe you get in a car accident and now you're in a wheelchair and now you lose something. There's going to be a point where maybe you lose the job, not through any fault of yourself, but you just did. If your identity is locked up in all of those four things, but it's not rooted in something transcendent, you're going to lose yourself. And I know this because I have seen people at the height of special operations, the sort of men that could run in to a dangerous situation, know exactly what to do, and have the presence that people write movies and books about. And when they left the military, they were completely lost. They didn't know who they were anymore. The reason why the spiritual is so important is because before any of those other things that I develop, I belong to Jesus Christ. He made me. He made me for a purpose. He made me because he wants to have a relationship with me. And no matter what else happens, no matter what else happens in my life, nobody and no circumstance can ever take it away. It's mine forever. I can choose to try to walk away from it, but it's mine. He gives it to me and he asked me to embrace it. And all of a sudden that comes with a sense of meaning and purpose and identity that nothing else can touch. And so I am proud of having at one time served as a Green Beret. I am proud at having one time served in the Virginia House of Delegates. I am very, very proud of being the husband of my wife. I'm very, very proud of being the father of my children. But the foundation which makes all of those other things not just possible, but allows me to be the best that I can be at all of those things is that my foundation first and foremost starts is that I'm beautifully and wonderfully created in the image of God and I belong to him and I'm a part of his family. And that's eternal.
I can't think of a better place to bring our conversation to an end. I think there's a lot of profound wisdom in there, Nick. I think you're an impressive guy, man. You've done a lot of stuff. But I think that you've managed to put together a vision of adulthood that is so sorely needed, just in the way you talk about these things and clearly the way you live your life. And I think it's admirable. And I'm glad you're out there in the world, sort of trying to model it, especially for our boys, but also for our daughters, because I try to do it to the best of my ability. One question before my final question is this. I have a final one, which you watch from time to time, so you know. But before I get to the sort of canned final question, we have put ourselves in this job of our own creation, where we put our ideas and opinions out into the world. And we finance that by various means, which ultimately involves proving to someone that we're making an impact. It's an advertiser, it's a donor, but it's somebody who has a vested interest in us reaching an audience. And what this puts forward is a potential for a kind of moral corruption in our most cherished beliefs. Upton Sinclair has this quote that a man will not understand what his paycheck depends upon him not understanding. But Jesus talks about this in his excoriations against being pious. Now, don't let your left hand know what your right hand is doing. I'm not a great Bible quoter guy, but I do know there's a bunch of times where Jesus is to the person that goes to into the front of the pews and make sure everyone knows he's such a good practitioner. He's not the first in the gates. It's the meek one in the back that's not trying to attract attention. So how do you, as someone that's trying to live and walk and bear witness to your values, defend your own understanding of those values, especially faith, from all of those corrupting forces that come with putting this stuff out there into the world? How do you keep yourself from being corrupted by the incentives of engagement, the commercial incentives, the ego feedback loops, all the stuff that this can do to us?
Everything from as simple as chasing clicks to chasing dollars to chasing clout. I try to remember a couple of things. One is I didn't get here because I did something that was so incredible or unique. There wasn't some grand life plan that I had laid out since the time I was 16. The only way I got here at the time that I did was by being obedient. One of the hardest lessons I've had to learn, I didn't learn it until my 40s, because I always thought that my job was to go and find a noble mission and then ask God to join me, and then he would bless that. And what I really discovered was my job was to ask God what noble mission he had for me and to join him. And I'll give you an example of what I mean by that, so this doesn't all sound just like esoteric. I didn't want to run for Congress in 2020. Like, I really didn't. I ended up running, and I didn't want to do it. But I had all these organizations that were coming forward that were asking me to run. It was a difficult district. There was a reason why not a lot of people wanted to run in that district. It was going to be hard. It was going to be one of the top 5 races in the country, and the incumbent had an advantage. And I knew all this. And I didn't particularly want to serve in Congress. And I certainly didn't want to give up my job to try to have to campaign full time. And so I prayed about it, and I was like, God, look, I'll be obedient, but I don't want to do this. This is not me. So you're going to have to make it obvious to me. It's the whole Gideon thing of putting out the fleece and making sure that it's God telling you he wants to do something. And I remember I put out like 2 ridiculous requests, to the point where the relatively small group of people that I told about it said, Nick, this is not reasonable. I said, good, that's exactly the way I want it. Because if it's unreasonable and it happens, then that might be a good indication that this is what I'm supposed to do. And within 48 hours, both of the things that I had asked for got answered overwhelmingly. And I said, okay, all right, that's what I'm supposed to do. We've all prayed about it. We believe we're confident. And so let's go do it. So I did. I gave up my job. And most people have this kind of romantic version of campaigning that it's like, whistle stops on the train and kissing babies and speaking to large crowds. In reality, it's 8 hours a day, 6 days a week, begging for money on the phone, which is, anybody that knows me knows that I despise that activity with a special loathsomeness that I can't convey to much else.
They don't put a lot of energy into teaching you how to do that in the Green Berets.
Oh gosh, it was so miserable. It was so miserable. But I did it. I did it. Why? Because I was being obedient. So I did it. And then COVID hit. And now you couldn't even campaign the way you normally would. So I'm having to do stuff online. And do you wear the mask? Do you not wear the mask? Do you get the vax? Do you not get the vax? Like all these stupid questions that should have never factored in. But I'm doing it, and I'm pushing through, and we're bringing on different people to do different things. And on election night, we won. And on the next morning, we had won. And early afternoon, we had won. And then a thumb drive that had got mislabeled in the bluest county in the district had 15,000 votes on it, and it completely wiped out our lead. And I lost by less than 2 points. And because we had left everything on the field, I didn't have the money to challenge this. Everyone, you need to fight. You need to do this. I'm like, you got thousands of dollars to pay legal fees for me? And oh, by the way, I don't even have standing. What do you mean you don't have standing? Because yes, it was an unmarked thumb drive, but they didn't do anything illegal. What am I supposed to do? How am I supposed to fight this? And all of a sudden, people that I would have thought would have been supporting me are screaming at me. I didn't concede. I tried to fight as best I could, but I literally ran out of money, and I'm not wealthy. And oh, by the way, the temporary job that I got for this campaign is now coming to an end. And so they're all wondering why I don't spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on legal fees to try to fight a case that I might lose. And I'm wondering, how do I pay the mortgage in January? And my wife and I both were like, well, thanks a lot, God. Thanks a lot. Like, we were obedient. We did what we were supposed to do, what we were confident that you wanted us to do, and you didn't hold up your end of the bargain. And we struggled with that. And about 2.5 years later, I'm sitting around this table with our my business partner, and I'm sitting around the table with my co-host and my research assistant and our video editor. And for 1.5 years, our social media pages have been getting 1,000 to 2,000 followers a day consistently. We went from having about 125,000 followers on social media across all platforms to having millions in a relatively short period of time. And it wasn't because we did some like one-off little cringy thing that got us a bunch of followers. These were people that were tuning in to where now we're getting millions of views a day on our content. And people are coming up saying, thank you for what you shared about your marriage. Thank you for what you shared about raising daughters. Thank you for what you shared about raising sons. Or thank you for making me feel like I'm not the only one that believes these sort of things anymore. Or somebody saying, thank you for changing the way I thought about guns, And I'm looking around this table and I'm like, I hired my co-host during the campaign. My business partner I met through the campaign. The video editor we brought on the campaign. Why? Because it was COVID. We couldn't campaign in person. We had to set up a podcast. We had to do live streams. We had to answer questions online. I had to get really good at answering random questions that just came in from all over the internet for hours at a time. The first person that gave us a shot, that provided us resources to be able to do this, was someone I met through the campaign. And I'm looking around and it's like, I had to run for office to meet all of the people that I needed to meet to develop the skill sets that I was going to do what I was going to do next. But I had to lose to actually do it. And at that point, I felt like a sense of like enormous gratitude and guilt. Mm-hmm. Like, how dare I tell God what success was supposed to look like? And so when I tell people, like, lean into this idea of obedience, I do so not just because I think it's going to lead you down paths that are always going to be happy. This was not a happy path to start off with. It was a very frustrating one. It was a very difficult one, but there was a lot of refining that took place in that process. But the other reason I say it is because it's humbling. And when you fully embrace this idea that I'm not here to do these things because it will give me followers. I'm not here to do these things because it might be financially beneficial. It is wonderful insofar as you may get blessed with that. But in other times, you're going to be asked to use that same platform and those same resources to do something that's going to be potentially horribly unpopular or financially devastating. You don't know. But when you learn to be obedient with small things, he ends up giving you many things to be obedient for. And again, it's humbling. So now when someone comes up and they say, how much of an impact they think I made on something, I am very much aware that had it been up to me, I wouldn't have been doing any of it. I would have chosen a much easier route. And one of the things I always try to stress when I talk about either the man book or when I talk to these young men is I always try to make sure that they understand something. And this is something that Charlie was uniquely good at, Charlie Kirk. Because when everybody was like, where's the next Charlie Kirk? Where's the next Charlie Kirk? And I'm like, Charlie would have never asked that question. Charlie always pointed to something much higher than himself. And I try to do the same thing. I'm not the standard for anything I talk about. I will try to live it out and I will try to live it well so that there is a reference, but I'm not the standard. Christ is the standard. And he gets whatever he wants out of me because of who he is and what he's done. And real hard to get cocky when you know what that is.
You're a fellow blubbery guy just like me, Nick.
I wasn't always. I used to be a lot of.
People don't understand this. That's all beautiful, and people don't really appreciate this very much. That when it's one of the ironies of being a man and being a father is that our brains get rewired when that first kid comes out.
Yeah,
and it's what you're making me think about is there's this sort of theological conundrum, paradox question called the problem of evil, right? How can there be this God you're talking about? How can there be this loving Son in Christ when we have so much evil in the world? So much and senseless stuff and stuff that's not even human. It's just Richard Dawkins, who you brought up earlier, talks about like mites that'll eat out the eyeball of a child, and all kinds of. There's a lot of messy, horrible stuff in this world, and I think the answer to the problem of evil is always the same, and it's that we just don't know the whole story. Mm-hmm. We don't know where the story is going to end, and so at any given time, whether it's at the start of that campaign trail or it's December 2020 for you, mm-hmm. or for any one of us at any moment where it feels like, why did this all happen and how could this all make any sense? You just have to stop and say, nobody knows the whole story. Like, we just don't. Mm-hmm. And when we look back, you can now look back on that and see this path. And there's lots of things in my life now that I can look back on and be like, holy cow. Like, that all suddenly all hangs together in a way that just didn't even remotely seem like it's not plausible any other way. And I think that's the answer to the problem of evil. It's like we have to just admit that we don't know what the total story of our life or the world is.
Yeah. Well, I think, it's interesting. People like Dawkins will come up with the problem of evil while embracing a worldview that can't even provide a definition of it. And
this is true.
The internal contradictions. But there's something to be said for none of us have perfect and complete knowledge. But there's a certain degree of, again, trust you have. And again, it's a form of verification. Right? When you step out in obedience and you get caught in a way that you didn't expect, it grows one's faith to where even the things you don't understand, it's the way I equate it to being a father. Did you ever have one of those instances where you had to discipline your child and the first thing they wanted after you disciplined them was a hug?
Oh yeah, of course.
Now, why is that? It's counterintuitive, right? Why would, when somebody disciplines me or if I get a spanking or something like that, why would the first thing I want or the first thing my child want would be a hug from the person that just had to do that? And the thing that I say is, because when that happens, there's been a history that took place before that. There's been a history of love and concern. And that history of love and concern is also real and also something we experience. And when we experience that and then something happens that we can't quite explain, there's an element of faith, there's an element of trust that comes into where I don't know why this happened, but I know you love me. And so I'm willing to trust until I do understand.
I ask this question of every guest as we come to the end. The show's called Dad Saves America because we both believe that being a father is this role we play that's really important, really potent. And how do you think about your role in the American story?
I think it goes back to what I said earlier, that my job ultimately is to be obedient. Obedient to who? God. What does obedience look like? Well, I can go to scripture for that. I can learn what my role is to be a protector, to be a provider, to be the sort of man that my wife trusts to lead, to be the sort of man that my son can look up to as an example of who he should become as a man, as a husband, as a father, to be an example to my daughter as demonstrating some of the characteristics that she should look to one day for the sort of person that she's going to raise her family with. But ultimately, it's about this idea of being a source of love and truth and security for my family, for the people that I love, and for the ideas that I believe in. Because I'm a I'm a firm believer. There's all kinds of things that we can talk about with respect to saving our country or saving our culture or saving our community. And there's a lot of things that need to be done and different skill sets that will be applied to all of that. But you show me a society of godly men and women becoming godly husbands and wives, becoming godly mothers and fathers, and raising their kids to do the same. And I'll show you a society whose politics you probably don't got to worry about.
Amen to that, brother. Nick Freitas, the book is The Man Book. It's perfectly named. You went with a slightly Marxian constructivist red, white, and black, which I can't help but mock.
I'm taking it back. That doesn't belong to them. That belongs to us.
Thanks for being on.
All of their constructions are perversions of ours.
That's right. That's right. They only know how to critique. Thanks for being on Dad Saves America, brother. I hope to see you again real soon.
Thank you. And very sincerely, thank you for what you do, John. You're doing great work.
Appreciate it, man.